section of this book of spiritual discourses of a great being in the turn of the 19th century in India known as Bhagwan Swaminarayan. I think there's a lot of universal truths that speak to all of us, even though we might be from different cultures, traditions, myself included. Today we're reading from passage Gadhadā 161 called King Bali. I don't know who King Bali is, but I hope they tell us. Actually, maybe Mataji could give us a little excerpt. Mataji, do you know who King Bali is? And if so, could you teach us a little bit about who such figure represents? She's thinking. I don't think she's ever thought this long before.
King Bali. He is a fascinating figure in Hindu mythology. King Bali, also known as Mahabali, was a demon king known for his unparalleled devotion and generosity. Despite his wealth and power, he remained humble and just, which earned him immense respect. In the story, Lord Vishnu took the form of Vamana, a dwarf Brahmin, to test Bali's righteousness. Bali promised Vamana as much land as he could cover in 3 steps, and with those steps, Vamana covered the entire universe, revealing his divine nature. This tale beautifully represents the idea of surrender, humility, and the impermanence of material wealth. How do you feel this story resonates with your own journey of humility and devotion?
Wonderful, thank you. That was a lot of words, but yeah, I guess we'll find out. I remember that story, actually. Yeah, I remember now. On Phalgun Vadhi III, Samvat 1876, or the 3rd of March, 1820, in our familiar calendar, Shriji Maharaj was sitting on a large decorated cot on the platform under the neem tree in front of the mandir of Sri Vasudev Narayan in Dada Khachar's Darbar in Gadhadā. So now the scene is set. He had tied a white cloth with a border of silken thread around his head. He was wearing a white case and had also covered himself with a white blanket. He was wearing garlands of white flowers around his neck, and tassels of white flowers were dangling from the left side of his pug. At that time, an assembly of munis, as well as devotees from various places, had gathered before him. By the way, I'm almost too scared now to admit that we've read how many passages, and I actually don't know what a muni is. I assume it's some kind of devotee. Maybe one of you know. And yeah, so Bali was a demon, but like kind of cool. What even would demons be in Hinduism? Yeah, that's a good point we should maybe clarify. That in Hinduism there's devas and asuras. There's heavenly beings and hellish beings. But one of the most amazing things about the asuras is that they have spiritual journeys that they're on too. They're not trying to be evil. Nobody is. They only have their own ignorances that they're working on. And Bali apparently was a demon that worked a lot on himself. So good for him. Similarly, even the deities, the angelic beings, they have their own ignorances too that they're working on. It really humanizes everything, I think, in this idea. So that's a good point. And I just learned about that too, Arya, that in Zoroastrianism, they swap the words Asura and Deva, instead refer to Deva and Asura, the equivalent concepts. Yeah, there's a big overlap in Vedic culture with Zoroastrianism, which is wonderful. And thank you, Om Tat Sat, for sharing that a Muni is a sage. Gregard G, you will add that Muni is one who is an expert in mental speculation or thinking. Remember Manan, or feeling. Yes, I like that. Makes sense. Muni, one who exercises their mind. So at that time, an assembly of munis, as well as devotees from various places, had gathered before him. Thereupon, Muktanand Swami asked, How can one remain composed even under the influence of lust, anger, avarice, and fear? Shriji Maharaj replied, I am not the body. I am the Atma. I am the soul, the consciousness, the true self, which is distinct from the body and is the knower of all. When such Atma realization, self-realization, becomes extremely firm, one never loses one's composure. On the other hand, a person without Atma realization may try many other means, but they cannot remain composed. Thereafter, Brahmanand Swami asked, to what extent does Atma realization actually help at the time of death? Shriji Maharaj replied, when faced with the task of crossing a river, one who knows how to swim can cross it, whereas one who is unable to swim will be left standing. However, when faced with the task of crossing an ocean, both require the aid of a ship. Similarly, a river, in the form of dualities of cold and heat, hunger and thirst, honor and insult, happiness and misery, these may be crossed over by a person with Atma, self-realization. Death, however, is like an ocean. In that case, both a person with Atma realization and a person without it require the help of a ship in the form of faith. Faith is very important for death. I remember my grandfather told my mom on his deathbed, have faith so strong that even death cannot scare you. I love that. Therefore, only the firm refugee in divinity is helpful. Oh, I see. Not the noun refugee, it's the verb refuge. Only the firm refuge of divinity is helpful at the time of death. Whereas Atma, self-realization alone, is of no use whatsoever at the time of death. For this reason, one should firmly cultivate faith. Muktanand Swami then asked another question. It is said that yogic powers entice a devotee. Does this fact apply only to those whose faith wavers, or also to those who have firm faith? It's one of the big hurdles on the spiritual path, that we may gain occult powers, spiritual siddhis they're called, and it's important that we don't engage ourselves in these spiritual powers for selfish means, because then we become attached to this idea that we've gained control over Maya, the material existence. But then we become trapped by this idea that we have to make our surroundings right. We have to control it in order for us to be happy again. Shriji Maharaj explained, yogic powers only appear before those whose faith is steadfast. For others, they are very difficult to attain. In fact, those powers are inspired by the divine to test their devotee. That is, do you really have more love for me or for the powers? God tests his devotees in this manner. You really love me? Okay, I'm going to give you this spiritual ability. If you love me, then you will only use this ability to cultivate more love, not for your own personal gain. If the devotee happens to be staunch and desires nothing except the source, it is free of worldly desires and is an ekantik bhakta, an absolute devotee, then God himself becomes bound by that devotee. We talked about this before. That in this tradition, we are servants of God, but God is a servant of our love. So with absolute love, then God becomes our servant, which is fascinating, but it's not one to be abused, that's for sure. Vamanji, which we heard from Mataji, who took 3 steps and took the whole land from King Bali, for example, seized King Bali's kingdom, which comprised of the realms of Swarg, Murtyalok, and Patal, which means heaven, earth, and hell, all 3 planes of material existence, and covered all 14 realms with his first 2 steps, the 7 realms of heaven and the 7 realms of the lower. Thereafter, King Bali offered his own body for Vamanji to place his 3rd step. Isn't that amazing? Step on me next, so that I can be a part of your kingdom. By the way, Vamanji was said to be an avatar of Vishnu or Sri Krishna. Many thousands of years ago. In this way, King Bali devoutly offered his all to God. Moreover, despite the fact that God deceived him without any fault of his own, God ultimately... Oh, I missed a sentence. Bali still did not falter from his bhakti, from his loving devotion. In this way, on seeing such unparalleled bhakti, loving devotion for him, God ultimately became bound by Bali, who was a demon king, remember? Although God bound King Bali only momentarily, in the process God himself became bound by the ropes in the form of Bali's matchless bhakti, loving devotion. In fact, to this very day, God is forever standing at Bali's gate, never out of King Bali's sight, even for a fraction of a second. In the same way, forsaking all other worldly desires and offering our all to the Source, we should also remain servants. If, in the process, God happens to inflict more misery upon us, then God himself will become bound by us. This is because he loves his devotees and is an ocean of compassion. He becomes bound by anyone who offers profound loving devotion, bhakti, to him. As a result, the mind of a devotee who has such loving bhakti becomes so bound to God that God is unable to free himself from them. Therefore, we should become more pleased as the Source puts us through more severe hardships, bearing in mind, the more misery the Source inflicts upon me, the more bound they will become to me. Thereby, they will not be away from me for even a moment. With such understanding, one should become increasingly pleased as that divinity imposes more and more hardships, challenges, but one should never become disheartened in the face of misery or for the sake of bodily comforts. Thus we conclude Gadhadā 161 on King Bali. So, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this this discovery process of learning from another tradition with me. Definitely universal truths there, which apply to all faiths, all faiths, all faiths, all paths.